You have no right to judge me!
I have every right. Contempt of court.
The laughter began before the studio lights had fully settled. It wasn't nervous laughter, or the awkward kind people use to ease tension. It was sharp, smug, and soaked in superiority. The kind of laugh that came from someone convinced they could never be challenged. Nobody in that courtroom realized it yet, but that sound would soon become one of the most replayed moments in televised courtroom history. Karen Mitchell, now remembered by viewers everywhere as Fat Karen, reclined in her chair with the confidence of someone who believed she was running the room instead of standing trial inside it. The way she stared at Judge Judy carried the same dismissive energy as an adult humoring a child who didn't know better. It was obvious from the start that Karen had badly underestimated the woman sitting across from her. For nearly 10 years, Karen had ruled Willow Creek Estates like an untouchable monarch. As president of the Homeowners Association, she enforced neighborhood rules with obsessive precision and a hunger for control that outweighed any desire for kindness or connection. Residents spoke about her quietly behind closed doors, comparing her to a school disciplinarian who had never emotionally left detention duty behind. And Karen enjoyed every second of it, every violation notice she mailed out, every fine she imposed, every complaint she filed with city enforcement made her feel powerful. She wasn't the neighbor bringing desserts to community events. She was the one canceling them because the decorations violated HOA standards. And today, in her mind, was supposed to be another victory. She had dragged one of her neighbors, a quiet woman named Lillian Cortez, into court over what she described as deliberate property violations. The offense? Planting sunflowers. Not on Karen's property. On her own. According to Karen, the flowers grew too tall, cast too much shade near the street corner, and disrupted the carefully controlled appearance of the neighborhood she guarded. Like sacred law, the entire dispute sounded absurd, which was exactly why television producers loved it. An overbearing HOA president facing Judge Judy was the perfect recipe for explosive television. The second Judge Judy entered the courtroom, the atmosphere changed completely. Conversations stopped. The audience straightened in their seats. Even the cameras seemed to steady themselves. Judy didn't need to announce authority. She carried it naturally. Karen, however, remained oblivious. She adjusted her cardigan and smiled with exaggerated sweetness that felt less respectful and more insulting. She greeted Judy like she was introducing herself at a suburban brunch, instead of standing before one of the toughest courtroom personalities in America. "Good morning, Your Honor," Karen said, dragging out the words with a smirk. "Hopefully we can move through this quickly. I do have an HOA meeting afterward." Judge Judy's face remained unreadable. "We'll take whatever time is necessary," she replied evenly. "Now tell me, Mrs. Mitchell, why are we here?" Karen sat up straighter, organizing her papers like a corporate executive preparing a presentation. "This is really a very straightforward issue," she began confidently. "The defendant knowingly violated neighborhood landscaping regulations after repeated warnings and has refused to pay the associated fines. At the end of the day, it's about accountability." The speech flowed smoothly from her lips. She had repeated those same words countless times at HOA meetings, where no one dared challenge her authority. She assumed this courtroom would be no different, but Judy simply watched her, silent, petted. And Karen made the fatal mistake of confusing patience for agreement. Lillian Cortez sat quietly beside her attorney's table, fingers tightly folded in her lap. Exhaustion rested on her face, the kind that comes from years of being targeted by someone who weaponizes rules. Judge Judy turned toward her gently. "How long has this been happening?" Lillian swallowed before answering. "Almost 3 years, Your Honor. I've paid more than $8,000 in fines. Every time I fixed one thing, she found another reason to punish us." The mood in the room shifted instantly. Even the bailiff lifted an eyebrow. Karen noticed the audience reaction and briefly glanced toward the cameras. sensing sympathy slipping away from her. Still, she masked it with another smug smile. "Some people just hate following rules," she muttered. Everyone heard it, including Judy. The next several minutes became a display of pure arrogance. Karen interrupted repeatedly, challenged interpretations, and even attempted to correct Judy's understanding of HOA law. Then came the laugh again. That same sharp, mocking laugh that made the audience visibly recoil. Judge Judy leaned slightly forward. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said quietly, "you may want to be careful with your words." Karen chuckled out loud. That moment sealed everything. What Karen didn't realize was that Judy had already reviewed far more than landscaping complaints. She had examined the financial reports tied to Karen's HOA management, along with irregularities buried deep inside the records. This was no longer just about flowers, and Karen, blinded by ego, had unknowingly triggered the collapse herself. After years on the bench, Judge Judy understood one thing better than almost anyone. Arrogant people always push too far. Karen Mitchell proved it perfectly. Most people, after hearing Judy's warning, would have adjusted their attitude immediately. Karen did the opposite. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and laughed again, the sound echoing through the courtroom like shattered glass. "Relax, Your Honor," she said dismissively. "You don't need to threaten me. I understand the law." The bailiff subtly shifted his stance. The audience grew silent. Judge Judy stared at Karen with calm restraint, like a storm waiting for the exact moment to strike. Finally, she spoke. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said slowly, "I don't make threats, I make rulings." Karen still didn't understand, or maybe she refused to. She had spent years constructing an image where she always held authority. Admitting weakness on national television would destroy that image. So she did what entitled people often do when confronted with truth. She doubled down. "I'm sure you do," Karen replied sarcastically. "But you can't rule on something you don't fully understand. HOA law is more specialized than regular small claims matters." The courtroom gasped. Karen had just implied that Judge Judy didn't understand the law. Judy's expression barely moved, but her eyes darkened. That familiar look spread across her face, the one audiences recognized moments before devastation arrived. "Mrs. Mitchell," Judy said carefully, "are you suggesting I'm unqualified to interpret the law?" Karen smirked wider. "I'm saying HOA communities operate differently. I've been HOA president for 8 years. Most judges don't understand how these systems work. No offense, but I've studied state property codes extensively." Judy said nothing. The silence alone made the room uncomfortable. Karen interpreted it as uncertainty and continued pressing forward. "This isn't about feelings," she said, tapping the desk for emphasis. "It's about maintaining standards. If people like Mrs. Cortez ignore rules, property values suffer. Protecting the community is my responsibility." She sounded proud. Dangerously proud. But instead of agreement, she found only cold stares from the audience. Even Lillian sat motionless now, watching Karen unravel herself in real time. Judge Judy leaned back calmly. "So you believe your behavior has been justified?" "Absolutely," Karen answered instantly. "The law supports me, does it?" Judy asked softly. The question hung in the room. Karen opened her mouth again, but Judy raised a hand, silencing her immediately. "Before you continue," Judy said, "remember something. This is not an HOA meeting. This is my courtroom. Speaking here is a privilege, not a right." Soft applause rippled through the audience. Karen flushed red but forced another laugh, though this one sounded brittle and nervous. "Whatever you say, Your Honor. I've dealt with worse intimidation from my own board." Judy leaned forward. "This isn't intimidation," she said coldly. "It's a guarantee. Continue laughing, and you may discover what happens when the law starts examining your own records." For the first time, fear flickered across Karen's face. Only for a moment, but everyone saw it. What Karen didn't understand was that her downfall had started long before she entered that courtroom. Years earlier, when she first gained authority over Willow Creek Estates, the position had slowly transformed her. What began as volunteer leadership turned into obsession. She stopped seeing herself as part of the neighborhood and began viewing herself as its ruler. Residents learned quickly that Karen's smile often arrived moments before punishment. A retired teacher named Denise Hall became one of her earliest targets after hanging a bird feeder without prior HOA approval. Karen responded with multiple citations, escalating fines, and an in-person lecture about attracting pests. "Rules are rules," she told Denise coldly. The bird feeder disappeared that same afternoon. Over time, Karen expanded her control. She rewrote bylaws, removed board members who questioned her decisions, and introduced increasingly ridiculous regulations. Families were fined for holiday decorations remaining too long. One resident received a penalty because a towel had been visible drying on a fence. Karen considered each punishment proof of her authority. But beneath that obsession was insecurity. She couldn't stand being ignored. She needed submission. And when anyone challenged her, she responded harder, louder, and crueler. Then the Cortez family arrived. Lillian and Daniel Cortez had moved into Willow Creek hoping for peace. Their children loved drawing colorful chalk flowers across the driveway. Innocent little moments that made their house feel alive. Karen saw violations instead. The first warning arrived within days. Unauthorized pavement markings. Then more notices followed. Larger fines. Harsher threats. Lillian tried reasoning with Karen once, even bringing homemade cookies during a meeting at Karen's home office. A spare room overflowing with compliance binders and violation reports. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. "If you wanted fewer standards," Karen told her, "you should have bought a cheaper house." From that point forward, the Cortez family became her primary target. Karen timed their holiday decorations, measured their grass height, photographed their mailbox, and fined them repeatedly until nearly $9,000 had been drained from their savings. The financial damage hurt, but the humiliation hurt worse. The children stopped drawing outside. Daniel stopped attending neighborhood gatherings. Neighbors avoided eye contact out of fear. They'd become Karen's next victim. Karen mistook their silence for victory. What she didn't realize was that every fine, every letter, every abuse of authority had created a paper trail, and someone had started following it. Judge Judy's research team had spent hours reviewing HOA records before the trial. What they uncovered immediately raised concerns: questionable payments, financial discrepancies, and suspicious transfers connected to Karen herself. Nothing proven yet, but enough to recognize a dangerous pattern. When Judy reviewed the summary that morning, she reportedly muttered only one sentence: "She's not protecting a community. She's bullying one." Back in court, Judy calmly slid a folder across the desk. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, "since you've spoken so passionately about accountability, perhaps we should discuss your HOA's financial reports." Karen blinked. "My financial reports? You mentioned transparency repeatedly today," Judy replied. "Surely you support it." Karen hesitated. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's relevant," Judy said evenly, "because you're asking this court to trust your integrity." Karen laughed nervously. "With respect, I'm not the one on trial." Judge Judy stared directly at her. Courtrooms have a funny way of revealing more than people expect. The audience grew still. Karen's confidence started cracking. Inside the folder were HOA records showing large payments labeled "Community Improvements," routed directly into an account tied to Karen personally. Judy read the numbers aloud: landscaping budgets, maintenance reimbursements, transfer amounts exceeding $50,000. Then came the question that shattered the room. "Would you like to explain why those payments were deposited into your personal checking account?" The audience gasped. Karen froze. That's a mistake," she stammered. "A mistake repeated over 4 consecutive years?" Judy asked sharply. Karen's hands trembled. "You're twisting things." "No," Judy interrupted. "I'm reading your records exactly as they appear." The cameras zoomed closer. Karen's confidence evaporated in real time. Judy pressed further. Do your neighbors know you were taking HOA funds while issuing fines to residents over flower heights and chalk drawings? Karen's voice cracked. I dedicated my life to that community. Save it, Judy snapped. You used authority to disguise greed. The audience erupted into murmurs. Judy leaned forward again. I've seen people like you before. You think running a neighborhood gives you power over justice. It doesn't. Then she revealed the final blow. An $900 transfer into Karen's account, dated one day after Lillian Cortez paid the exact same amount in accumulated fines. Coincidence? Karen whispered weakly. I don't remember. Oh, I'm sure you don't, Judy replied coldly. But your receipts do. The courtroom went silent. Judy turned toward Lillian. How much did you pay this woman over 3 years? Almost $9,000, Lillian answered softly. Judy nodded slowly before looking back at Karen. So fascinating, she said. Exact amounts down to the dollar. Karen tried denying it again, but Judy cut her off immediately. You stole from the very people who trusted you, and you laughed while doing it. Karen sat frozen. Her arrogance had collapsed completely. Then came the final unraveling. You think you know me? Karen suddenly shouted through tears. I worked for that community. I kept everything together while everyone else complained. Judy remained calm. This isn't about effort, she said. It's about ethics. Karen's voice broke. They hated me. They wanted me to fail. The only person who caused this, Judy replied quietly, is the one staring back at you in the mirror. Karen collapsed emotionally. Years of control, intimidation, and superiority dissolved under the weight of exposure. Judge Judy's tone softened slightly, though the words still landed hard. You spent years making good people miserable, and the irony is that you were breaking the law the entire time. Karen sobbed quietly. No one respects you unless you force them to, she whispered. Judy's response came like a final hammer strike. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And once it's gone, fear can't replace it. Then the clerk stood and read the official notice. The state attorney's office had launched forfeiture proceedings related to fraudulent misuse of HOA funds exceeding $40,000. Assets connected to Karen Mitchell would be seized pending investigation. Karen's eyes widened in horror. Judge Judy looked directly at her. 5 minutes ago, you were laughing at this courtroom, she said. Now you're watching everything you built collapse in the same amount of time. Karen tried standing, but her knees buckled. The bailiff steadied her gently. The woman who once ruled Willow Creek Estates had finally encountered something stronger than intimidation. Real accountability. The following day, Karen returned to court looking completely transformed. No carefully styled appearance. No smug expressions. Just exhaustion. Judge Judy reviewed the final ruling calmly. Misappropriated funds totaling over $48,000, assets seizure. Restitution property forfeiture. Karen's voice trembled. I didn't mean to steal. I only borrowed it. Borrowing requires permission, Judy replied sharply. You took what wasn't yours. Then came the sentence that destroyed what remained of Karen's world. The property located at 214 Willow Creek Lane will be seized and sold. Karen stared in disbelief. My house? You built that home using other people's money, Judy answered. And they're suffering. Karen broke down completely. Please, she whispered. Don't take everything. Judge Judy shook her head. Everyone makes mistakes. But arrogance turns mistakes into crimes. Then the gavel struck. Case closed. Karen left the courtroom in silence as reporters surrounded her outside. Questions flew from every direction, but she didn't answer. She simply kept walking. Meanwhile, Willow Creek Estates finally changed. The HOA dissolved Karen's policies, refunded wrongful fines, and placed a bench inside the community garden with a brass plaque that read, "Power means nothing if it costs your humanity." Lillian planted sunflowers again. Children returned to drawing chalk flowers on sidewalks. Neighbors started smiling at one another without fear. And somewhere across town, Karen Mitchell sat alone inside a small apartment she never imagined living in. haunted by the sound of her own laughter. The same laugh that once filled a courtroom with arrogance, now echoing endlessly like a ghost she could never escape. Judge Judy never publicly celebrated the case. Weeks later, during an interview about the viral footage, she only offered one quiet statement. Sometimes justice doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. And that was the line people remembered most. Because in the end, Karen Mitchell's story wasn't really about flowers or HOA violations. It was about what happens when entitlement mistakes itself for power. Eventually, truth arrives. And when it does, arrogance collapses under its own weight.